Joining us with more is Dore Gold. He's the former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, as well as a former advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and Benjamin Netanyahu, and he joins us by phone from Jerusalem. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, Ambassador.
You're very welcome.
Well, according to one Muslim cleric, Jerusalem will soon be the new capital of the Middle East and the Muslim world. Your reaction, sir, to the results of the election?
Well, obviously, I think Israelis have very mixed reactions and a lot of trepidations about where all this is going. You know, the Muslim Brotherhood was the wellspring of so many of the violent organizations, the international terrorist organizations that grew in the Middle East, from Al-Qaeda to Hamas. Abdullah Azzam of the Jordanian Muslim Brotherhood was bin Laden's teacher and took him from Saudi Arabia to Afghanistan, the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed came out of the Kuwaiti Muslim Brotherhood. And I can go on, but there's that whole record of how the Muslim Brotherhood was linked to some of the most terrible incidents of violence that the West has experienced in the last 10 years. Now, there's always the hope that under Dr. Mohammed Morsi, something's going to change. But all we really have is a hope, and the record of the past looks pretty bad.
Well, why is it only a hope? I mean, just a moment ago in the report that preceded this interview, we heard from Coptic Christian leaders here in Canada who seem somewhat optimistic when they look at the speeches and so on that Mr. Morsi has offered recently. There's certainly a conciliatory tone.
Well, certainly there may be some statements mostly directed towards the West that sound more pragmatic. And one, again, can only hope that that will be the case. The man has not yet been tested. But at the same time, there's a whole history. The Muslim Brotherhood operates under the direction of a general guide. He's called the Murshid. His name is Mohammed Badi. He's sort of like the head of the Brotherhood in Egypt. And Badi said back in 2010 that there's no place for diplomacy with Israel, but only jihad. So if that is the kind of thinking in this organization, one can hope that the new president-elect of Egypt, Dr. Morsi, is breaking away from that. But I have no evidence that that's the case.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said this of the election results, that he respects the outcome and, quote, expects continued cooperation with the Egyptian administration. Is that what you are expecting, sir?
Well, I think we have a peace treaty with the Egyptian state, and we are hoping that Egypt will respect that treaty the way we respect that treaty. Israel has good relations with the Egyptian military, which sees peace with Israel as an Egyptian interest. So we hope that we can build around those coalescing interests to protect stability between Israel and Egypt and protect the treaty itself. But at the same time, we're very aware that ideologically the Muslim Brotherhood was against peace with Israel and speaks about Israel in the most disparaging terms.
And I've read that there were celebrations in Gaza. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. They're giving out candies in the street. Again, people don't know this or forget that Hamas is actually the Egyptian branch, is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is an Egyptian organization. It's its Palestinian outlet. And therefore, Hamas feels empowered by the victory of the Muslim Brotherhood in the presidential elections in Egypt, and may decide to try all kinds of military initiatives against Israel, thinking it has the automatic backing of the new Egyptian government.
As we noted at the outset of the interview, you are a former advisor to Ariel Sharon, Benjamin Netanyahu. If you were giving Mr. Netanyahu advice today or any of the Western allies, what might it be?
Well, I think there are two things. Number one, with respect to our statements vis-a-vis Egypt, we have to respect the decision of the Egyptian people to elect Dr. Morsi. And we can only hope that the new Egyptian government will adhere to the peace treaty the same way that previous Egyptian governments have adhered. But, you know, we have our skepticism. We have to also make clear to the West that we expect that countries like the United States, Canada, the UK, France, Germany, and others will remind the Egyptians that they have obligations that they undertook under the Treaty of Peace with Israel, and they should maintain those obligations. That, in fact, the West would look down upon any effort by the Egyptians to erode that peace treaty. I think if we have strong international support for maintaining what has been the cornerstone of any Arab-Israeli peace, we have a good shot at keeping this relationship stable despite the existence of Hamas and despite the ideologues of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Thank you, Mr. Gold, for joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
That's Dore Gold. He's a former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, as well as an advisor to former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and Benjamin Netanyahu, joining us by phone from Jerusalem.